everybody says, well, how can we fix this without any more money? And I want to go, if it was that bloody easy, don't you think we would have done it by now? Yeah. What can be more important than shaping the lives of children, and particularly the most disadvantaged, vulnerable children?
100%.
You haven't seen my wife's cooking, so...
Oh, gosh!
If they work with 5 2-year-olds for a day, I don't think they'd ever be talking about increasing ratios.
Hello!
And welcome to another episode of the Tiny Chair Pod, the podcast where we sacrifice our comfort and lower back health, frankly, for your viewing and listening pleasure. And it's a big guest on the Tiny Chairs this week, isn't it, Julia?
It is. We have none other than the CEO of the Early Years Alliance, Mr. Neil Leitch, with us.
Big cheese in the building.
Big cheese. I absolutely cannot wait to hear a bit more about what the Early Years is like behind the scenes, what it's like to be a lobbyist, what it's like in the Houses of Parliament.
Yeah, and also maybe getting to know, the man behind, the story behind the man a little bit more as well.
Absolutely.
And as ever, if you do want to get in touch with us, please drop us an email on tinychairpod@family.co.uk. We'd love to hear suggestions for future guests or feedback, or we'd love to hear shout outs about you and your team. So please do get in touch.
Absolutely.
With that, let's get on with the episode.
Let's do it. Hi everyone, just to let you know that Neil shares really honestly some stories from his childhood in this episode, including about his family's experience of domestic violence. If that's not something that you'd like to listen to right now, then we'll see you in the next episode of the podcast. Otherwise, let's meet Neil. Let's get on with it. I think you should introduce Neil.
Okay, absolutely. So, as we mentioned, Neil is the CEO of Early Years Alliance, the largest early years membership organisation in England with over 14,000 members. Within that role, Neil is often the spokesperson, of course, representing the interests of the whole early years sector to the media, the Parliament. During his time at the Alliance, Neil has endlessly called out so many issues, whether it's underfunding or putting the educator well-being at the front and centre with things like the EYA's Minds Matter report, and was involved in the successful 2013 Rewind on Ratios campaign. Maybe we can get back into that. He has an honorary doctorate from the University of East London. That's pretty cool. And a Lifetime Achievement Award from Nursery World, and even more impressively, an OBE for his extraordinary contribution to early years education. You know him as the guy on the news who's complaining about early years and the person who's looking after our interests for the wider world. Neil, welcome.
Thank you. That's such a magnanimous introduction. Normally when we speak, you don't reference me in that way. So.
I don't give you such a grand. Such a grand intro. Quick question, starter for 10. Which of those sort of, awards or things, do any of them mean more to you than any of the others? What was the one that really stands out? I know you're not in it for the awards,
No, but each in its own right has its own value. So, for example, the doctorate, where I had no education as a child. I left school when I was 14, and I'm probably the least qualified individual in my organisation. And so it was quite something actually to receive recognition in terms of the doctorate. And I guess the telling comment was from my son, who's just finished his master's in law at Exeter University, who said to me, "You don't even have a GCSE. How come you have got the honorary doctorate?" And I did say to him, "So which one of us is the smarter?" So that meant a lot. But I also would say national recognition with the OBE was, it's a lifelong legacy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Somebody asked me, what would you like your legacy to be? And I just want my family to be proud of me. So I think having a doctorate, having an OBE is a tangible manifestation of that.
And so far it sounds like, I don't know, your son sounds like he's got some tension there a little about whether he's proud of you or not, or a bit frustrated that you got one for free without having to do the contract.
He is now doing a PhD. He's working in finance actually, but he is doing a PhD. So I think, tell me he's got a proper one.
Wow.
I love it. Julia, you had a proper starter for 10, didn't you, for Neil?
I did, yes. So I would love to know. I've lost my questions.
It's on the next page.
Is it? Oh, dear me. Bet this doesn't happen on Good Morning Britain. Where's mine? Oh, there we go. So.
We're flustered for the first time.
Do you know what? I'm a little bit startled. I'm like,
This doesn't usually happen to Julia.
Well,
Yeah.
you should have seen when I met Julian Grenier. I started giggling. I was like,
Oh gosh.
Julian, please. What I would like to know is, has there ever been a time where you've been in an interview, and I'm thinking maybe perhaps a slightly more formal one than this one, where you've been asked something so daft or so outrageous or silly that you've either just wanted to laugh or you've had to kind of really hold back?
I don't honestly think there is. I've been asked some pretty difficult questions, but I don't think I could ever say that I've been asked a stupid question.
Interesting.
I might have given stupid answers, but I don't think actually. I've been asked uncomfortable questions that I think sometimes the interviewer should know better.
Right.
Or is trying to steer me down a line which is highly critical of a particular person or an audience, etc. And that is probably the worst case scenario. But I think when you work in early years, dare I say, you're sort of almost prepared for anything. And because what we do is good and it's just, and we have a strong case, I'm not really fearful of any questions that might come my way.
It can't possibly be harder than the questions the educators are getting from the 3-year-olds sometimes, to be fair.
Possibly along the same lines, I would say.
Love it. And I think while we're talking, we do normally start the podcast with asking our guests for an early years ick. Now, are you familiar with the concept of an ick, Neil?
No. So that doesn't help, does it?
An ick is something that makes you a bit uncomfortable or you're sick of seeing it, but not anything that's inherently bad or dangerous, just something that you think about.
What have we had in the past? We've had nappy bins.
Oh, we've had sitting on tables. That was Alice's, I
that
think.
was Alice's.
When she walks into
The
a classroom
pennies
and she's
that people wear in
that
nurseries.
was that Alison's, I think?
That was Alison's, yeah.
But yeah, just
what would be
something
what
like
would
that.
be something you're like, yeah, hate that, love to get rid of it?
It's going to sound a bit vulgar, but
Oh.
vomit.
Vomit. Yeah,
would
okay.
be my ick. Although everything else I think I'd be pretty good at. I've always felt that I'd do well in that, the Get Me Out of Here Jungle program.
Oh, yeah?
Interesting.
I don't think I would fear, scorpions or spiders or...
Do you think you could eat the eyeballs and all that stuff?
Yeah, I do actually.
Interesting.
I mean, you haven't seen my wife's cooking, so...
Oh, gosh!
We talked before the podcast about bits that Neil might ask us to edit out afterwards. I suspect that might be foremost.
I can say that because my wife just would be the first to agree with me.
Okay, nice. We've got a spicy take nice and early.
Yeah.
Julia, what would you be worst at the celebrity stuff? I mean, I guess for you, first and foremost, not being a celebrity is probably the main obstacle.
First of all, how dare you? I'm an absolute celebrity. I think for me, do you know what? I think it would be that you have to be sort of on all the time. And I feel like, because you're on camera all
Okay,
the
so
time,
not even
right?
any of the trials specifically,
I sort of feel like that's copable with, because, gross stuff happens, sure. But I think, being on camera all the time and having to sort of think, oh my gosh, there's millions of people watching this. I think that'd be,
I think for me, I could do the eating and I could do the creepy crawlies and stuff, but I'm not claustrophobic, but I definitely when I realise I'm stuck in a space, I do panic a bit. Like I'm a big mover in bed, if I feel like I'm in the wrong space. And so I think I was like, they put them in coffins, don't they, sometimes? And then they put a load of creepy crawlies. I wouldn't be good at that. Anyway, is this where you thought this podcast was going to go when you joined, Neil?
Not really. I'm not used to these questions, but it makes a pleasant change.
Now you've got a good answer for the next time someone else asks what's the time you were asked a daft question.
We'll cancel the getting in a coffin segment as well, I think.
So
if that's how you feel.
Makes sense. We'll we want to get onto the meat of the interview in a bit, but we normally start with a few quick-fire questions, Neil. So to start us off, is there an EYA project or campaign that you'd say you're most proud of, looking back over your career and the Early Years Alliance of the last few decades?
Without a doubt. I mean, I think we were really successful with the Rewind on Ratios campaign, because I think that was absolutely critical. But actually, the one that really touched me and will always touch me is the Minds Matter campaign, which is about the mental health and well-being of our people, because when you hear the stories, when you talk to people and you see the pain and the stresses that our colleagues are under, I think they were just taken for granted, and it was accepted that they would do anything. I was asked actually just a few weeks ago in a radio interview, and it was all to do with children, the new initiative on children and cleaning their teeth, toothbrushing and early years settings, supporting them. And the presenter opened with saying, that's not anything to do with you guys, is it? I mean, that's surely parental neglect. Why are you doing this? And I found myself sort of reacting and saying, you know what, we do a million things that are outside.
Do you have
of our
any
remit.
idea?
Yeah, of what we do in terms of our remit. And in a way that's connected to Minds Matter, because we seem to think that our people can continually do everything.
More and more and more.
More and more, and with little regard for what the impact of that is. And so for me, that was, I think that was a real eye-opener for me, full stop.
I couldn't agree with you more. The Rewind the Ratios was sort of before my time, but I remember in that first Minds Matter report.
Don't rub it
came
in,
out.
Matt, before
when
your
I said
time.
before my time, made it. It was in 2013, wasn't it? I wasn't born in 2014. I just before my time in the sector, you could say. But I remember when the first Minds Matter report came out, I felt exactly the same way. I was like, it feels like this is the conversation that somehow we're not having. We're sort of skirting around it. We're talking about policy. We're talking about pressures. We're not actually talking about what impact that's causing on the sector. And I've lost count the amount of times I've quoted statistics from that report because it's so valuable, isn't it?
I mean, completely. Because there's so much that people don't know. That it's not just the more public things like the funding, and we hear a lot about that, and we hear a lot about ratios that obviously we're in the sector, but the wider public do. But it's things that really affect you as an educator. Like, you have to make a safeguarding referral and you can't talk about it. You have to leave all of that information in your heart and in the setting, and you get home and someone's like, but you're just playing all day. What's the matter? Yeah. And you think, yeah.
Yeah, it was a vital, I think it was a vital piece of research that we did. And I know my colleagues who led on it. In a way, it took an emotional toll on them, but, all credit to them for,
I can imagine,
pushing 100%. It to the
100%.
fore. And we did an updated version of that, and Mind Still Matter, just a couple of years ago. Right. And that touched me a lot as well. My mum was constantly sectioned under the Mental Health Act. She was physically abused. My father when she was married to him, and it took its toll. And I remember saying at a conference very recently that I can recall myself and my younger brother not really understanding the impact of mental health, and when she would become incredibly anxious and distressed, we would go, come on, Mum, pull yourself together. And she couldn't. And so personally, the Minds Matter taught me some huge lessons about assuming nothing with people.
That recognition of mental health more broadly, I think, is invaluable to, all of us, I suppose.
Yeah.
How do we follow on from
turn?
that? I think it's me, isn't it?
Go on,
is it
it's
me
you.
or is
Go
it
on.
you? We're letting people show the sausage majors a little bit here, aren't we?
Yeah.
Should it be you? Should it be me?
Go on, I'll go.
All right.
So I read, actually, on the Alliance website that you play football in your spare time. I would like to know which team you support.
I'm a Liverpool man. So this season we've done really well. And
Congratulations.
Yeah, well, I think actually most of my adult life I've sort of played football, and I'm 70 years of age now. So when I was 60, I used to think that I will play football until I'm 65. And then I was 65 till I'm 68. And then 68 until I'm 70. I love it. It's the only time where I can switch off.
Are you still going in with the two-footed crunching tackles?
I think I'm a strong player.
That's one way of putting it. Interesting.
And I really enjoy it. I play with my eldest son, I got married very, very young, so he's 53 years of age, and one of my grandchildren plays professional football in Iceland.
Wow.
And when he comes back, I mean, the most annoying bit is when he comes back, off season, he's probably not technically allowed to, but he'll come and play football with us. And we're on a football pitch, and he's shouting out, "Grandpa, pass the ball, stop calling me grandpa, But I love it. It's just, it is seriously the one thing that just, I can switch off from everything else. Otherwise, I'm constantly thinking about things. So.
Everyone's got to have that though, haven't they? They've got to have that release, that escape from everything. Yeah,
100%.
I hope you're still playing in another 5 years or longer, maybe.
Yeah, although I'm getting a bit slower now.
Oh dear.
That's all right. Hopefully the people you're playing with are also getting a bit slower. I guess that's the point.
No, they're getting younger.
Oh dear.
But it's good. I say I do keep. I think I'm reasonably fit, and ironically, I am still quite a fast runner. I could still. Yeah, so.
We can have a little race next time I'm over.
That's a deal, Matt.
Can you imagine? All right, we've spoken earlier, so let's get outside.
Yeah, quick rolling race.
Yeah.
We are just interrupting the wonderful chat with Neil to bring you a very special guest. I'm very pleased to welcome the wonderful Maria to the Tiny Chess studio. Maria, welcome.
Thank you very much, Matt. And I'm very happy to be here, basically auditioning for the co-host position of this podcast.
It's a big deal. Julia's out to the toilet, so we'll have to be quick to make sure we wrap up before she gets back. But Maria is our head of customer marketing here at Family. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what we're up to around the invoicing changes that are coming to England and how we're working with our customers on them. So Maria, what's going on?
Yes, absolutely, and I'm very happy to be sharing a bit more information around this. So, as you very well know, there are a few changes coming up, and that means that we need to make some changes in Family to make sure that all of our work and your work is compliant. So, this means that we are changing layout of our invoices, all costs will be itemized, plus we are adding a few extra features to make sure that your work is streamlined with just one click.
Very nice, a little bit of that Family special sauce. So do you want to talk to us a little bit about how we're working with our customers on making sure we're getting these changes right?
Absolutely. So, as you are saying, it only makes sense to make sure that all of our customers are part of the process, that we hear what they need, and we just keep ping-ponging on how we're working. So, we've taken calls with you, we've shared early stages of our work to make sure that you can share with us your opinion, what's working, what's not working, and then just adjust around that. And it's an ongoing process, so as we continue to work, we will continue to seek feedback.
Very nice. And if you're a customer of Family already, definitely check out Village to be a part of the conversation. And if you're not, then you definitely can soon. Thank you so much. I think we better get out of here.
Oh dear, far too much of that Family special sauce, I think. What's going on in here?
Check Village, join Village and be part of the conversation.
Thank you, Maria.
Yes.
Get out of here. Another question we wanted to ask, and it's kind of, I guess, into the theme of the podcast a little bit, is bringing people behind the scenes of your work and what it looks like. You've been to the Houses of Parliament any number of times now. To the sort of, we've got lots of educators and managers and leaders listening to this. Like, what would you want them to know about what it's really like? Because I think it's so mystified, isn't it? It's like, what is it really like getting to go to the Houses of Parliament? Like, what's your insight behind what it's really like spending time there and spending time with ministers?
Yeah, tell us a secret.
I would say at first you're in awe because it is a new world. My background was never politics, education. It was finance. I used to work in finance. And I think you think it's a different world, but very quickly, these are just people.
Yeah.
And I don't mean just people. They are obviously in incredibly influential positions, but they are just people.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think has helped me is that in the nicest possible way, I am no respecter of persons. I think we are all equal. I'm uncomfortable having to address somebody as Lord or Lady, etc. I think people should take you for what you are. So in Parliament, I was sort of in awe to start with, then realised these are normal people and you can have normal conversations. And I also quickly realised that not all lobbying and campaigning is measured in decibels. So whilst, for example, you might be on a BBC programme and you're asked a question and you have to, and rightly so, criticise the policy of the day, I try not to make it personal. I try not to go, and he said this or she said this, because I understand that we all have a position and a place. And I think it is much more constructive to understand that and talk to people and be able to allow them to air their views in confidence. So I would never repeat the conversations that I've had. I've been in front of the Prime Minister on personal conversations, and every Secretary of State I've had a one-to-one with, every Chancellor over the last 20 years. But what I don't do is I don't bow down.
Yeah.
And I think it's important they understand the challenges that we have. So I don't think anybody should ever be, I suppose, feeling that these are buildings, places, these are people that are untouchable.
Yeah.
We're all equal. And I honestly believe that. When you said at the beginning of when we started this, you talked about, which sort of accolade, I suppose, are you most proud of?
Yeah.
Whether it's an OBE, a doctorate, or whatever it happens to be. Do you know what immediately came into my mind? Actually, I think the most successful accolade I ever got was just a couple of years ago, where somebody wrote an email to me from Southend in a project we were working with and said, "Hi Neil, today I leave the Alliance. You probably don't remember me, but a couple of years ago, you came here and you spoke to us about your background and various bits and pieces. And you said at that time, the best thing that your mother ever did was leave your father. She said, I wanted to stand up in the room and scream because I was in a domestic abuse relationship and I thought I was doing the right thing staying there with my children. That day, I took a decision and walked out."
Wow.
Gosh, that is incredible.
That is the biggest achievement I've ever had in my life. Not an OBE, nothing else, that. And that is all about, I strayed from your question, but it is all about people and realizing that we're all valuable, we're all important. And I would also just, to bring it back, say this. I've spoken to enough politicians, senior or otherwise, they're all right.
Yeah.
And I know if I could get them down the pub and get them drunk, they'd say, "Neil, we need to invest much more into the early years.
I agree with you.
Your
mate.
sector's always right," all of that. So,
assuming the best intent, not the worst intent. More pubs. I love it. That's the way to change the world.
possibly that.
Phenomenal legacy, though. My goodness.
It's definitely one of the things we wanted to talk to you about today, because I know you've been more candid, especially recently, more about your upbringing and what that was like. And I wonder if maybe you could share a little bit about how the impact that's had on the work that you do today and how you think about things differently than if you were maybe from a, let's say, like more an easier early childhood, let's say.
I would just preface it with, Matt, that I have an incredibly close friend who, on the surface, probably would argue that would have had a completely different background to what I had. Different environment, secure family, etc., etc. But it still made him one of the nicest people that I've ever come across, right? So what I think I'm trying to say is that, yes, we often are a product of our environment,
Right.
but we also have the ability to shape our own destinies and our own lives. So I think what I'm trying to say is, I think I had a reasonably, in comparison to some people, tough background maybe, but that's not an excuse for being a bad person or a good person in a way. But my background was simply my mum married a soldier stationed out. My mum came from Lucknow in India, and she was very, very young. She married a soldier. I think she had a miraculous pregnancy, because when I was more of an adult and I was able to work out the time when she got married and when she'd had her first child, it was a really short pregnancy. So I think she was pregnant before she got married. My mum would never mind me saying that, because we used to laugh about it before she passed away. And my father, she was 16 years of age. My father brought her he was from Greenock, just outside of Glasgow in Scotland, brought her to Scotland.
Gosh.
But as I alluded to, he was an alcoholic, a really violent individual. I can think of lots of instances where, he caused harm to her. He burnt her with an iron once. I remember him mixing up a drink of shampoo, tablets, all sorts of things, and trying to make her drink it. I remember my younger brother and I, and running down, he said he'd broken into the home, because at that point we were living somewhere else, and we came home from wherever we were, and he sent us off to the shops to buy some sweets. And I can remember we ran down there for the first time in our life. We weren't really interested in what we were buying, because we knew my mum was going to be hit. Ran all the way back to our house, ran in, and there was my mum standing at the top of the stairs, because it was a 2 up, 2 down. and covered in blood because he'd hit her. So some awful things that had happened to her. And that's why I said earlier, it was no surprise that she went on later in life to have, mental health issues, constantly sectioned under the Mental Health Act, etc. And as a result of all of that, I'm one of 6 children. We were all taken into care. And I'm coming back to the point about a tough background doesn't mean you have to follow that path, but all into care. I was the most distressed child. I was the one that fretted and cried more than anybody else, even my younger brother.
That's hard to believe now, Neil. You're so calm and poised all the time.
I know, but it was the case. And the equivalent of social services back then allowed me to go home to my mum, even though they knew there was a risk of my father and all the rest of it. And I constantly will say this, that what I had, we didn't have money, we didn't have much. But the attachment that my mum gave me, the love that she gave me, I think is what made me want to achieve things later in life. It is interesting, and I've said this in the public domain before, that my 3 older siblings, who were all exposed to much more of my father's violence, and were in a care home much longer than I ever was, all died of drug and alcohol abuse. And I think that's down to effectively their exposure to disengagement, lack of love. My mum would go and see them once a week. We were in care homes in a place called New Addington near Croydon and Shirley, but still they didn't have the ability of attachment, and therefore they ended up being a product of their environment.
Just goes to show how powerful one person can be. Yeah,
and I just think that's just critical. But I come back to the point, there are a lot of people, I don't think I'm damaged by it in any way whatsoever, but what it has given me is I hate bullying, for one. I always felt that I would be the person sitting on a train that couldn't sit there. If anything happened, I would have to intervene. And I still think that's the case. I can't help it. And I hate injustice. There's that wonderful sort of saying by the late Desmond Tutu, isn't it, that to remain silent in an injustice is to be on the side of the oppressor. And I think that's probably the thing that has driven me to do what I do at this point in time. But there are a million people like me who've had tougher lives, do considerably more as well.
Thanks for sharing, Neil, and just so powerful, I think, to continue to share that story and maybe inspire more people who might be listening today about getting out of a difficult situation that they're in as well.
The hard thing I would say, Julia and Matt, is that in a way I speak about it much more these days, and I'm trying to convince people it's not because it's a sad story, because I honestly, it's given me so much. The Alliance has given me so much as an opportunity to be able to do things that I would not otherwise have done. But it is not a sad story, and it's not about sympathy or anything. It's just, and that's why I keep trying to emphasise, my closest pal has been through circumstances himself, I'm sure. But we had different backgrounds, but still he is a good, kind person. Yeah. So it's not just your background, it's you as an individual sometimes taking that choice, but it's always helped if other people, it's always easier if other people intervene. And for me, it's, somebody tells you you're good at what you do, that's much more inspiring than telling you you're a rubbish child. So,
but I guess to talk a little more about what your aspirations for the sector maybe are, and in that regard, I think one of the recurring themes that you talk to, presumably as part of this history of yours, is this theme of supporting young children and supporting children through what they're going through. I wonder if I want to kind of throw into that this current focus by a lot of the government on school readiness and on the skills that we need children to acquire. What's your take on the skills that we really need children to acquire most importantly in the early years in order to handle the world that they're now being thrown at, whether it's technology or AI or geopolitics? Like, what do you think we should be focusing on making sure our children understand?
There's no ambiguity in my mind. Again, just a few months ago, I think it was a Radio 4 program, and it was all about school readiness and teachers fundamentally saying, we shouldn't be having children arrive at school because we teach.
Yeah.
We're not there for fundamentally their well-being. And I would emphasize that the vast majority of teachers recognize that care, education, even love, dare I say, is an intrinsic part of how a child moves on. But on this particular program, there was one individual who subsequently wrote to me, and she laid into me because I made the statement that, listen, I'm not concerned if they arrive at school outside of nappies. I'm not concerned with some of the tangible, technical things that you keep saying. And I've quoted this a few times before, but it still holds true. I was asked by a journalist what I thought a successful child looked like when they left a childminder, a preschool, or a nursery group. And I found myself saying that I don't care if they can recite the alphabet, count to 100, or name 5 planets. Success for me is a child that is kind, is empathetic, is thoughtful, that is gentle, is loving, and will grow up into an adult that possesses those very same qualities. And I went on to say, and I'd woken up in the morning to some pretty grim news when I made this comment on BBC Breakfast from some of our, dare I say, world leaders. I'll try not to be too political, but world leaders who I did feel would have benefited from being at an early years setting and understanding.
It's never too late.
Never too late. But I found myself saying that there is no value whatsoever in creating the brightest sparks in the world if they do not hold kindness. Kindness is what still will give us a chance of still being on this planet in 200 years' time. Yesterday evening, I'm getting the bus back from my office to London Bridge Station. And I thought this was really interesting. I'm sitting right at the back of the bus, so I'm right at the back. And there's a lady in front of me, and everybody's rushing off to get off at London Bridge and get their train. There's a lady just in front of me. And this is going to sound like a bit smug, but I don't mean it this way because it's not about me. But I waited to let her, because I was the last on the bus, go in front of me. And you could see that she was sort of a bit stunned by the fact that I just let her go in front of me. And then as we got to get off the bus, there was a mum with her little daughter struggling to get the pusher out of the sort of area and come off the bus. The very same lady got back on, that I'd let go in front of me, got back on that bus and helped this lady off with the pushchair. And I've always said, I find it very difficult to be rude to a kind person. I find it a lot easier to be rude to a rude person, but I think it's a way of saying that it's the soft qualities in early years that I think are absolutely critical, because we create citizens that will go on with those qualities to want to learn the academic side of life, they will go on to be higher taxpayers. They will cost us less in crime. They will cost us less in health. And as I say, I think perhaps if our future world leaders had been with an early years provider and developed those qualities, we might have a safer planet.
That's a rallying call we all need to hear.
Gosh.
What's up next, Julia?
God, sorry, this always happens when we talk to interesting people and I get excited to listen, and then Matt has to sort of remind me that we're on a podcast and I'm supposed to be talking and asking, and I'm just like, I'm just listening. Sorry. Michael, you might have to do a bit of editing.
It's quite all right. I'm happy to jump in. Here's a question for you, Neil. What's the closest you've ever come to stopping?
I haven't ever come close, but I would be misleading you if I didn't say there were walks from London Bridge Station to Old Street, across the river, the long way round, where I haven't felt unhappy with the state of the sector and what I am doing. But you constantly meet different people. You constantly meet different politicians. And it's fair to say I've had my fair share of politicians I've felt have let me down, have been shallow, have given lip service to various things, but have never come good. But I've also had a couple that have behind the scenes done things that colleagues in the sector would probably never know and would never realise. And because I think we're an organisation that doesn't generally scream about all the good things that we do. I'm not an individual that you'll find, generally posing with, I don't know, whoever is posting a photo with them or whatever it happens to be. Or coming out and saying, I've just met with XYZ and he told me this or she told me this. For all the reasons I said earlier, because I think respect people, respect their position, and relationships are absolutely critical. But there have been moments where I have felt, particularly from the government, why the heck do we do this? And then I honestly talk to myself. I mean, if you followed me, you probably would think, I had headphones on.
That football playing bloke is definitely having a word with himself, yeah.
I said this at our conference last year. Just before conference, I received an email from somebody who basically said, "Hi Neil, I don't know." She runs a setting, 51 places, 35 of those children have additional needs, and she runs a setting. She said, "Neil, I don't know how long I can carry on doing this because I'm petrified in trying to support all of these disadvantaged, vulnerable children. Something will go wrong, and I am the one that will end up in prison." And I thought to myself, you whinge about your life and what you have to put up with. It is nothing compared to what. And she's probably doing that for a pittance in terms of income, etc. So context when I'm feeling really down.
Good advice.
Those occurrences they're more frequent in the last couple of years than they should be. And something has to change. And I'm hanging on to the fact that for a little while, I don't think we've had much movement, even under the current government. But in conversations I've had, I have to hang on to the fact that colleagues in positions where they can do things, some colleagues have intention. And if you haven't got intention, you've got nothing. So I try and hang on to that.
I'd love to know, actually, you talked a bit there about, that walk back to the station, and arguably you have an awful lot of responsibility for the sector on your shoulders. How do you reckon with that? How do you feel when you tuck your chair in and leave the office for the day?
I don't think I ever switch off. I honestly... So
apart from when you're going in with a big 2-footed sliding challenge.
Yeah, it is that football game is the only time, but I don't know, I feel almost privileged as well. I sort of said I left school when I was 14 years of age, no qualifications. My starting role was working in a factory making what we called ice pop machines and all the rest of it. And I was fortunate enough that people took a chance on me, a little scruffy urchin, and gave me a chance in finance and banking. And I think I've got a book on my desk where the chief executive of GE Capital has named me in the book as one of the industry personalities. So I went from this nothing into being recognised, and a guy called Colin Sanders, who was the chief exec of GE Capital. And then I ended up chairing the Finance Industry Standards Association. But none of it compares to the opportunity to change lives. And that's what we do. And the moral compass, forgive me, Colin, if you ever should see this podcast, but the moral compass.
Sorry, Colin.
Finance,
he was our first subscriber.
But Colin was a great guy, but the moral compass of the finance sector is nothing like the moral compass of the early years sector.
I'm sorry, Neil, but that is not a controversial statement.
I know. It's a low bar, isn't it? I know it's an awful bar, but this sector has given me an opportunity to just meet people who want to do the right thing. I come back to that point. When you ask people why they work in the early years sector, and particularly those in the front line, they don't say, I'm really good at creating balance sheets, and I'm really interested in having a good return on my investment, or EBITDA or whatever. They use words like, I love children, I care for children, I want to change their lives, I want to do the best I can, I'm good at being with children and developing children. And that is the person I would want to care and educate my child. And you're right, Matt. I don't recall having any of those conversations when I was in finance. The day I got out of finance, and I think this is interesting, was in Barclays Bank, and it wasn't Barclays Bank because it was but they just had the meeting in their premises of main lenders, basically, in the second mortgage field. And we had a couple who had borrowed money for their son. They were in their 80s, and they'd made a self-declaration of income saying that they were freelance gardeners, earning the equivalent of probably around £250,000 at this particular point in time. They had no county court judgments. They had no mortgage. And they'd asked a particular lender, a high street bank, if they would lend them some money, which was for their son. And the banker said, no, can't do it. Our criteria doesn't allow it. But we do know this company, which was a wholly owned subsidiary, that can help you out. And so the company accepted this self-declaration of income from them, knowing that they just couldn't have done that level of work. They couldn't have done that level of work. The son never repaid them, therefore they never made a penny repayment on the loan. After 3 months, and I recall it, the APR was 16.9%. It moved to 49.9%. And the lender just basically hung on to that until they got to a reasonable chunk of owning that couple's property. And then they moved for repossession. And I'm hearing this as the chair of the Finance Industry Standards Association. And I remember the director...
Time for a change.
I know, time for a change, because I remember the director of the bank saying to me, Neil, you seem to be forgetting, this is not about ability to repay, this is about ability to repossess. And that was the day, seriously, that I thought, there is more to life. And then so when you compare that sort of scenario to somebody that goes home at 6 o'clock in the evening with a parent who has picked up their child who is intoxicated because their partner has just walked out on them, been with them for 16, 18 years, I can't remember the exact time, has just left them with absolutely everything. It's the first time they have ever sort of collapsed in that way. They've come to pick up their child, they're intoxicated. What does the manager do? She knows this is a one-off. She goes home with that mum and she sits with her until 6 o'clock in the morning until she comes round, because she knows the alternative consequence is agencies and chaos for that mum. That's the difference in terms of a moral compass.
Wow. Thanks. It's so true. And it's definitely it's why we're proud to get to support the sector as much as we can, just as much as you are. It's absolutely what we're here to do. And we are very much the worst of them. We just get to do the support. They're doing the real work, you know. I totally agree with that. All right, I've got a bit of a spicy take question here, Neil, that you can just refute the entire concept of, if you like. We've got a segment we like to call Best and Worst. And in this case, you know, you've seen a few policies come and go. You've seen a few early years ministers come and go. Some of them, arguably, the statute of limitations is out on. I'd love to hear from you. Who is maybe we'll start with the easy question. Who's the best early years minister that you've ever worked with? And we'll say you can't say the current one because, you know, that would be cheating. So, Stephen, if you're listening, he would pick you if he could.
If the question was asked as to who I think genuinely got it, but could do little about it, if I rephrase that question.
Yeah, go on. You can do that.
That would be Claire Coutinho. I think Claire got it, but couldn't change it.
There's been others who didn't get it and could have changed it.
A lot who didn't get it. A lot that spoke to me and almost said, you know, well, if you don't endorse this, you know, you'll never get anything again. And you can imagine what my response was. I also thought David Blunkett was a really good Secretary of State, actually. I thought he had a genuine conscience at heart, And there've been obviously quite a few shadow colleagues that I think have been, but that's probably the person I think that present company accepted.
Good job. I'll save you from the difficulty of having to ask the worst one there. But it's interesting to know, and I think it's such so it's probably a little bit relevant to what we want to finish up on with some of our questions here at the end. But that difficulty of those who can change it not being able to, and those who can't, not necessarily, I think is very true. I wonder what you feel is at this point. If you could click your fingers and change one thing, give you ultimate power for the day, what would be the one thing that you would absolutely want changed in the sector for the better?
Adequacy of funding. Because I think adequacy of funding comes because you have got recognition of the work that you do, the status of the sector. I think somebody has recognised the value, the long-term investment of what we do. And so the way in which you fix all the ills is you start with adequacy of funding, in my opinion, adequacy of funding, which then allows us to pay our people a respectful wage, allows us to become part of the education system, etc., etc. So it's funding. If I had a day where if I was just allocated a day in terms of what I could do, I'd spend it with the Chancellor. I don't think the Chancellor understands the impact of early years to the degree and in the scale in which she should. So I would spend a whole day saying, you come with me, you talk to this parent, you look at this child, you see this child that comes in with with literally odd shoes because that's the only shoes that they've got. You see the child that's just stolen that sandwich out from that little boy's rucksack to eat in the morning. It's not a Kit Kat. It's not a Mars bar or whatever it is in terms of perhaps the worst food. It is a sandwich because he's so hungry. And if you saw it and lived it, you'd make different decisions.
I mean, I think on that, actually, the recent study about the impact of Sure Start centres was pretty illustrative of that. And I think probably most people in the sector knew that. I think we know that these things have a phenomenally net positive impact over the investment. And the sort of response was that, that's very nice, but we probably can't afford to do much about it, which seems incredibly defeatist, given that it's been proven to be incredibly a good investment. So, yeah, that's...
Can you afford not to, I suppose, Julia, would be what I say. And my argument is always that, everybody says, well, how can we fix this without any more money? And I want to go, if it was that bloody easy, don't you think we would have done it by now? And the reality is that it's about priorities. When this government or any government wants to find the money on a new initiative, they find it. Somebody tell me, what can be more important than shaping the lives of children, and particularly the most disadvantaged, vulnerable children? Stop talking to me about GDP and return on capital investment. Talk to me about keeping young children safe, out of prison, wanting to be good people. There is not an excuse for it.
There's a fundamental miss when there's so much of a focus on the financial element of it for parents. And I think there's also a fundamental miss in the way the government thinks about that, which is that ultimately parents will know if the quality of early years care is going up. They'll understand it. They'll understand the impact that has on them. And ultimately that's appealing to the voter base. And that's it might be the wrong reason to do the right thing, but it's at least the right thing, One of the things I wanted to finish on, Neil, is you've said, I know you like this Nelson Mandela quote. I've heard you use it many times, that the arc of morality is maybe. I see now. I knew I should have written it down. You'll have to give it to me, Neil, so that I know exactly.
Because I can't remember it.
Julia?
Oh, Nelson Mandela said some good bits, didn't he? Do we have
But
it?
the point of the quote fundamentally is that it might be a little bit of a curvy way of getting there, but fundamentally it's in the right direction. The curve of morality is in the right direction. I wonder what keeps you hopeful in the days where the zigs feel very ziggy and the zags feel very zaggy, that the line is ultimately going in the right direction.
This is an arrogance from me. But I can't help feeling that at some point in time, we will get someone who wants to bring about change and will be as committed as people were in the cabinet when they stood up to Boris Johnson and said, I'm resigning, I'm going to do this, because the path you are following is just not acceptable and not good enough. And so I live in hope that we have people that will get to a point where they will make considerably stronger cases with Treasury and take personal stands that will move things along. And when I say I'm arrogant, it's because I reckon if they spent more time allowing me to show them, and I don't mean, a half-hour peripheral sort of visit to a setting.
Nice slideshow presentation.
Yeah, photo shoot or whatever it happens to be, so we can get a social media post. I mean, roll up your sleeves, spend a day, not just working in a setting, but talking, as I said earlier, to some of the most vulnerable families. I think it would move them, and I think, because I was moved by it when I had to do it. I sort of tell this story of I often go out to settings, and I went into one particular setting and they said, we love you coming here, Neil, but why don't you come and work in it for a couple of days? And I was in one of those really buoyant moods. It must have been the morning after I'd played football, right? So I said, love to. First day I blocked the sink, so I spent 3 hours unblocking the sink. and the second day they let me go home early. And I knew when I came out of that setting the second day, if I worked in an earlier setting, I would drink a lot more, I would swear a lot more, and I would steal some of the children. And so I learned a lot, and I think I'd love our leaders in the Department for Education come and live it with me for a day.
That's the answer.
I'm curious about this as sort of an apprenticeship scheme. I like that, we've got a recruitment crisis and there's a wealth of people in the cabinet just like, well, come on, we need some bank staff.
Busy, right?
Like,
scrap T levels. I think it's just bringing in the cabinet.
Yeah, we've got to get them in settings.
They'd have to be supernumerary though, wouldn't they? I don't think we'd let them be in ratio.
Wow.
That's really interesting because until recently, I couldn't work in an early years setting because I don't have a level 2 qualification in maths. I could chair the Finance Industry Standards Association that regulated second mortgage across the whole of England, but I couldn't work in a nursery because I don't have a level 2 maths. But yeah, that's what I mean by practical experience, deeply buried into the DFE. They may have removed it now, but it was there a little while ago, was this 5-point plan that policymakers were meant to look at when they form policy. And 2 of the key elements of that were, will it work? So you're meant to ask yourself, will it work? But the most important for me was, who made you the expert? That's what they were meant to ask themselves.
Slightly concerned they had to write that down.
I'm not suggesting a day in an early years setting or a day being a childminder in a group setting or being a childminder makes you an expert. Far from it. But that one day exposes you to enough, I would suggest, that you might think twice about, so when I'm looking at introducing this policy, perhaps I should be thinking about X, Y, Z. Ratios might help. If they worked with 5 2-year-olds for a day, I don't think they'd ever be talking about increasing ratios.
I couldn't agree with you more on that when there was talk around the... Anyway, we could be here all day.
I know.
Neil, that's been genuinely so wonderful. Thank you so much for giving us so much of your time and telling us your story. Maybe you could finish off by talking to us a little bit about what the Alliance are working on right now. Maybe you've got some projects you want to plug or some things you want to tell our listeners about.
I think there are probably a couple of things that are key for us at this particular point in time. And one is that the impact of the Chancellor's national insurance contributions, impact of minimum wage, particularly, dare I say, differentials, is really hitting home. And particularly, I would suggest, on settings where they are operating in rural communities or areas of disadvantage, where parents are struggling to do anything beyond take the entitlement hours. And if, according to the IFS, by September, 80% of all hours delivered will be government funded hours. The importance of that funding rate is absolutely critical. And that is just not the case. And so for us, it would be funding would be number one. And I know, for example, there are campaigns out there and people are clubbing together to perhaps challenge the government on, policies out there, legal challenges, all the rest of it. My concern slightly is that there will always be something that will come forward that will cause us distress. And therefore, the real solution to all of this is adequacy of funding. And that means an independent body assessing what that adequacy of funding is. You will have stability in the market. And I use that term in a sort of slightly uncomfortable way because, of course, we all are in a market, but people that work in early years know that children aren't commodities, right? So it's important to distinguish that we don't mean children are part of a market. But you'll get stability once you get adequacy of funding, and you'll get, as I said, recognition of the workforce, etc. So that's number one. The second, I think, it's almost how we are portrayed. And I think in recent months, there has been some foolish things, probably unintentionally said, that have put a further divide between the PVI sector and schools.
Yeah.
I don't think that people work in the PVI sector really feel that they do a lesser job. And I've spoken to enough people in schools that understand the value of the PVI provider. But the language that's trotted out is not being helpful. And, the old saying, you can bang a nail in the wall, you take the nail out, but the hole is still there. And to a degree, that damage is done. So I think we have to work on repairing that relationship and having a true relationship. Doesn't matter where a child is cared for and educated. What matters is the quality. And it doesn't matter actually if it's in a school, in a shed, or in a home or in a group setting. It doesn't matter. The quality of that care and development is critical. But to start putting dividing lines in terms of suggesting one may be better than the other, I think is destructive. And so I think we have to fix it. And that's the second thing I think we'd like to do, is to work with colleagues who I honestly think a lot of this was unintended consequences, but it was damaging, ignorant language. And dare I say, final comment, pre-election, no matter what anybody's political position was, I was speaking to lots of people when they talked about the earlier sector, had hope, genuine hope, after a long time of being ignored and being done to, that things would change. And that change has to happen damn quick, because we haven't seen a lot of it to date.
Couldn't agree with you more. And for those people listening who aren't already a member of the Early Years Alliance, couldn't recommend it well enough, that all the work that they do over at the Alliance and that you and your team do, Neil. But thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a genuine honour, and to hear your stories and to hear your thoughts.
Oh, no, you're welcome. I've probably said a few things that have got me into trouble or people will disagree with, but hey-ho.
That's just what we were hoping for.
Yeah.
Cheers, Neil.
Thank you. Take care.
Wow, Julia. What a chat that was. It was a bit hard to remember that we had to ask questions at points, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. This happens, though, when we talk to these amazing people and they have amazing stories to tell and advice. And I just feel that I'm sort of lost in listening. And then I remember that actually it's a podcast and we're supposed to be doing some talking as well.
Yeah. It was good. I thought Neil shared so many amazing stories. It's always lovely to chat to him. And for those of you who don't know, we actually have a special partnership with the Early Years Alliance, where whether you're a family customer today or you're not yet one, you can actually get a special discount at family, because the Early Years Alliance actually uses family in all of their settings. So that's pretty cool. So if you'd like to use the same platform that the Early Years Alliance are using, you can find out more information on eyalliance.org.uk/exclusive-offer-alliance-members-only. I think maybe you should just Google it.
Bit of a mouthful, isn't it? We'll put it in the description.
We'll put it in the description. Julia, we have some good shout-outs this week. I'm so excited. Not just one, not just two, but three shout-outs.
I'm so delighted. So this week, absolutely bulging mailbag of shout-outs. Shall I read the first one?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay. So cheers to the early years. First of all, Tracy Hornby of the Penny Pot Nursery has written to us to tell us to give a big shout out to Sophie G, who gained her level 3 early years educator qualification with distinction. So
Big up, Sophie G.
huge congratulations to Sophie. Well
Sophie
done.
G in the
Amazing.
house.
Sophie G in the house.
Very nice.
In ratios, in
In
fact.
ratios now.
Well done.
Next up, we have Mary Hobson of Honley Daycare and Pre-Prep School says, I am super proud of our setting. Our staff work so hard to ensure the children receive the highest level of care. We've just submitted for Individual Nursery of the Year at the NMA Awards. Pretty cool.
That is amazing. Do you know what?
Fingers
I
crossed
love
for
those
you.
sort of shout outs because there's plenty of managers out there. Just write in if you're proud of your setting. We'd love to hear about it. It doesn't have to be a special occasion.
No,
It doesn't have to be a qualification. Just tell us that you're pleased and proud.
Agreed.
Amazing.
If you're happy and you know it, send us an email.
Right.
Julia.
Our last shout out is from Diana Buckle of the Tiny Toes Day Nurseries, and this is a bit of a long one. So she says, a huge well done to the entire team for a fantastic day of filming at their Warren Avenue setting. The energy, enthusiasm and professionalism really shone through.
Nice.
And she wants to say a special thank you to their colleagues at Lord's Hill for their valuable input and support. They are so proud of what they achieved together across the two fantastic settings. And she says their Warren Avenue setting continues to receive amazing feedback through their Scores on the Doors system.
Ooh.
And a big shout out to Sabika, Rochelle, Gift, Farah and Barbara for successfully completing their paediatric first aid qualification. So an absolute wealth of shout outs there.
Wow.
Congratulations to everybody.
Huge shout out to the whole team. I love the
Amazing.
Scores on the Doors idea.
Yeah, it's very
Should we do a
interesting.
Scores on the Doors for the podcast?
Well, as long as they're good.
What would you give this podcast?
10 out of 5.
10 out of 5.
Yep.
And what a way to finish that
That's
is.
maths.
We will see you next time. And as ever, if you like this episode, please do share it with someone who you think will like it too. And leave us a review if you haven't already. We'll see you next time. Cheers.
Bye.